Welcome everyone to this afternoon's Allowable Ex Parte. I'll ask Mr. Melchers to read the docket.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, we're here pursuant to notice of request for allowable ex parte briefing. The party requesting the briefing is Palmetto Utilities, Inc. Briefing is scheduled for today here in the Commission's hearing room, September 17th at 2 p.m. And the subject matter to be discussed at this briefing is regulatory treatment of plant acquisitions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We'll take appearances from the parties and get near a microphone so so you'll go worldwide.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am John Hafer. I represent Palmetto Utilities, Inc. We appreciate the opportunity to present this allowable ex parte briefing to the commissioners. Here to make the presentation on behalf of the company are Mark Dade, the President and Chief Financial Officer, and Mr. Brian Stone, the Chief Operating Officer. And unless the chair has anything from me, I would turn it over to these gentlemen.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Jenny Pittman for ORS.
Thank you. Okay, I think first before we begin, Ms. Pittman, you have instructions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Jenny Pittman. I'm a staff attorney for the Office of Regulatory Staff. And I'm here today as a designee for the Executive Director of the ORS at this allowable ex parte being presented by Palmetto Utilities, Incorporated. As the ORS representative, it is my duty to certify the record of this proceeding to the Chief Clerk of the PSC within 72 hours that this briefing was conducted in compliance with the provisions of SC Code Section 583260C. It is the ORS representative's sole responsibility and statutory duty in these proceedings to attend the briefing and file a written certification that such briefing was conducted in compliance with the provisions of this section. I am not a referee, judge, or hearing officer, and I do not and cannot represent the commission or the presenters. It is up to the presenters, commissioners, commission staff, and all attendees to ensure that the actions here today follow the provisions of 583260. That is the purpose of the statement which you need to sign and return to the desk in the back of the room when you leave today. The requirements of 583260 are, in part, that the allowable ex parte be confined to the subject matter which has been noticed. By limiting discussion to the subject matter noticed, the statute creates a narrow exception to the general prohibition against ex parte communications. In this case, the issue noticed is regulatory treatment of plant acquisitions. I therefore ask that everyone here please refrain from discussing any matters not related to that subject. Secondly, the statute prohibits any participants, commissioners, or commission staff from requesting or giving any commitment, predetermination, or prediction regarding any action by any commissioner as to any ultimate or penultimate issue which either is or is likely to come before the commission. Third, I would ask that the participants, commissioners, and staff refrain from referencing any reports, articles, statutes, or documents of any kind that are not included in today's presentation to prevent the need for myself or the company's lawyers from having to try and track down copies or links to these documents to include in the record. And again, please make sure to read, sign, and return the certification form to the commission staff, which you were given at the door when you came in today. Everyone needs to read this form and, if necessary, make any appropriate comments before signing and returning the form. This form needs to be signed by each attendee to certify that the requirements contained in 583260 have been complied with at the presentation today. Thank you all for your time and attention. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Pittman. Okay, Mr. Dade and Mr. Stone, we will turn it over to you. Oh, punch that button right there, and now you're on.
Now we're good? Okay, thank you. Thank you for granting us the time to speak to you again. It's always good to come before the commission and give an update on kind of where we're at on things. Today, Brian Stone and I are going to speak on two major matters, really kind of an update on where we've been over the last few years and in terms of our capital program and our company. It's changed a bit. And then I'm going to speak specifically on sort of an unusual rate-based accounting issue that we would like to discuss with you today. So we only have 9 slides. We're going to try to keep it brief, but at the end, feel free, obviously, to make any questions you have during the presentation, but also at the end, we're fully expecting to be able to answer any questions you may have. The next slide is an abbreviated org chart. And at the top box, we show Packlet Milliken, which is our ultimate owner. It's the Milliken family here, as you know, in South Carolina. The three orange boxes at the bottom are the three utilities that we own. The two to the left are in South Carolina, and the one to the right is in Florida. The middle box there that says Packlet Milliken Utilities is really just a kind of a holding box. Two boxes that aren't shown is one that has all our overhead. We allocate it to each of the companies for efficiency and cost efficiency reasons. And we also have a septic receiving station that takes waste from septic tanks and porta potties and great things like that. Additionally, we own Lockhart Power, an electric company from the top box. Brian is also president there. So we share some resources in that regard. But today he'll be here talking regarding the water wastewater companies, and specifically Palmetto Utilities and PWR, which is Palmetto Wastewater Reclamation, the two boxes on the left. Palmetto Utilities is a combination of two companies, Palmetto Utilities and the assets and customers that we purchased from the City of Columbia in 2013. We blended those together and merged them a few years ago. So that includes what we call PRC, or oftentimes the city customers. And PWR is the old Alpine and Woodland utilities and their assets that went into that company. Brian?
Good afternoon. I just have a couple slides to give a quick overview of kind of who we are and our profile of the utilities. So with Palmetto Utilities, which now includes, as Mr. Dade mentioned, the customers and assets of Palmetto Richland County, the original legacy Palmetto Utilities had about 20,000 ERCs, or equivalent residential customers. Very established utilities, been around for about 40 years or so, low cost, well run, very cost effectively run and efficiently run. Had one wastewater treatment plant called Spears Creek, and it's a regional treatment facility under the 208 plan. The treated wastewater is now discharged into the Wateree River, and I'll speak to that in a moment. Originally, it was discharged into it was a land-based discharge into a rapid infiltration basins, and then we converted that over. And I guess the highlight, the big picture story, and we've spoken to this commission about this within the last year or so, is $80 million of capital was invested into the Palmetto Utilities system. That numbers in a vacuum don't necessarily mean a lot. In the context of the size of this utility, it's a tremendous investment. It was a once-in-a-generation type investment. And it was not what we were initially envisioning when Packlet Milliken purchased America. But as we got more into the analysis of what was needed and the timing, it became clear that the best long-term solution for our customers and to provide the services and the growth that system was experiencing would be to go ahead and make investments, which I'll get into in a moment. The Palmetto of Richland County utility was carved out from the City of Columbia, and it immediately borders the Palmetto system. It's to the west. It had roughly 13,000 ERCs. One of the conditions of that purchase was that we take the wastewater load off the City of Columbia's system and bring it into the Palmetto Utility system, the wastewater treatment plant, which again is the Spears Creek wastewater treatment plant. So that was part of the overall set of projects that we had to perform within the last several years. And then the other utility, PWR, that was purchased by America in 2011. It's located roughly in the I-26 and I-20 area, actually right here as a matter of fact, mostly in Lexington County, has about 8,000 ERCs. There's a woodland system and an alpine system. One of those has a 2 million gallon per day treatment plant, and then the other has about a 300,000 gallon per day lagoon associated with it. When that system was purchased, it is what we would describe as a distressed system. There were a variety and a large number of spills, violations, public concern. It was subject to EPA and DHEC penalties. It was just a system that was in desperate need of improvements. And so part of the purchase of that system was basically included requirements that we would improve the system, that we'd make significant investments into improving that system. And since 2011, in fact, we've invested $13 million roughly, and that falls into two broad categories. One are improvements at the Stoops Creek treatment plant, which is the 2 million gallon per day facility. And then the other is in the entire collection system. And those, we've gone above and beyond, in fact, what we had originally planned on doing in terms of investing in and improving that system. The result has been that we've dramatically reduced the number of spills, and the very few spills that there are essentially trivial in terms of quantity. So it's a drastic improvement in the environmental and public health performance of that utility. And even after that, again, for that system, it's a very significant investment over that period of time. Even after that investment, the rates are still extremely low compared with our peer group, which Mr. Dade will touch on in a moment. And we view this as a significant success story for our general model when we have an acquisition, to be able to come in, deploy capital and the experience that our management team has very cost effectively, and just fix what needs to be fixed and do it as inexpensively as possible and try to keep the rates as low as possible. And basically what everybody hopes their utility will do. This is one of the examples we point to for our past performance in that area. All right, and then the other piece, I've already touched on this, but in the Palmetto system, the $80 million that we've invested in the last several years, there ended up being 3 major projects and then a collection of other projects. And the 3 major projects, with the wastewater utility, there's a collection system, a treatment system, and then you discharge the treated water. And so each of these large investments is associated with one of those components. And so the Northern Pipeline was a pipeline that we built in order to connect the collection system that we acquired from the City of Columbia under PRC. We connected that back to our wastewater treatment plant, the Spears Creek plant, that is under PUI. As I mentioned, that was an obligation of the purchase. The specific route that we chose allowed several things to happen. First, it provided that physical connection. Secondly, it allowed us to serve future customers in a significant way. So the route goes through kind of the border of our system where the development had occurred and where all the new development, or most of the new development, was going to occur. And so those are pipelines that would have had to been built separately had we not served that need with this pipeline. So long term, that was the most cost-effective way to go. The second piece is the Spears Creek wastewater treatment plant upgrade. We doubled the capacity of that plant. It was a 6 million gallon per day plant. It's now a 12 million gallon per day plant. In addition, some of the features, is very cost effective to do this. Some of the features are actually designed for future expansion well down the road to 18 million gallons per day. If we ever get to that point, we'll be able to do it much less costly than had we not gone through that design exercise. It was built at a very competitive rate. The rate's there, but that's from all the other large expansion projects and capacity that we've seen. That's a fraction. It's not just 5 or 10 or 20% less. That's a fraction of what other plants are being built at or building capacity at. There's a story behind how we were able to do that, but it took a lot of time and effort. We reused a lot of the equipment that we had, and we went through an iterative value engineering process to get to that point. That didn't just happen. The third piece is the effluent discharge to the treated water. As I mentioned, used to go to Ribs, and now it goes to the Wateree River. That pipeline was a significant investment as well. It did provide several benefits, including closing the Ribs. The rapid infiltration basins were an area of concern for some of the residents in that area and for Kershaw County. So we worked with both of those groups over a period of time, and this ended up being the solution that that was acceptable to everyone. The last category is kind of a catch-all for everything else, and so we had a wide variety of smaller projects that collectively we invested in our ability to find I&I or influent infiltration, so we can reduce the amount of water that didn't need to be going to our plant to be treated and was. Just a wide variety of cost-effective type initiatives for the most part. And again, overall, it's hard to overstate how significant this investment was in the context of Palmetto Utilities. This is something that has set us up for growth in an area in northeast Richland County where there has been sustained solid growth for many, many, many years. The projection is it will continue to be that way. And so we're now positioned to be able to very cost effectively connect and allow it and support that economic development opportunity, which is we think a great public benefit beyond what our core mission is.
Thanks, Brian. That gives us a brief background of where we've been over the last few years, especially since 2015, when the Packlet-Milliken family bought the companies. What I'd like to go through now is kind of where we're at in rates and then the accounting issue that we mentioned earlier. Most of us came ultimately from non-regulated backgrounds, so we're very conscious of competition and how our product matches up against our competitors. This is a table that shows our competitors. There are the neighboring utilities that are the closest to us, and you'll notice I think there's 13. Palmetto Utilities, even with the rate increase we had recently 2 years ago now, for many of the items that Brian mentioned, the capital program and other things, we're still in a very competitive position on the lower half of this chart. Even though we're going in for a rate case, our other competitors, our peers at the top, especially the City of Columbia rates, are continuing to increase and will continue to increase for as far as the eye could see. So we'll still always be in that middle position a few years after the upcoming rate increase. I think the most important thing to notice, though, is that we are now through the capital cycle, as we call it. These things often run in cycles where, unfortunately, at one time we had to spend a lot of capital, and we did, but we should be looking at generally maintenance capital for the next 5 or plus 10 years probably, and therefore just rate increases that are pretty close to inflation, perhaps even lower. Palmetto wastewater reclamation at the bottom, that was a great success story that Brian had mentioned. We took two companies that were in the news often and spilling a lot and refurbished everything, and still were able to keep rates relatively low in the table compared to our competitors. And they are through the capital cycle, so they should be seeing hopefully only inflationary type increases going forward. One item I want to point out here is the second item from the top. Second company is City of Columbia out-of-city rates. These are the rates that our city customers that we bought would be paying now. And despite the rate increase we recently had, taking us to $52.10, they would be paying $71.25 if they still lived there. As you probably know, we were one of the pioneers of town hall meetings. We get out and meet our customers often, always before a rate increase. And obviously it can get a little heated, and customers have said, you should have never bought us. We should have stayed with the city. And I'm fortunate to be able to point out to this number to say that had you stayed with the city, your rates would still be a lot higher. So we were able to accomplish things at a lower rate. Which brings us to the main issue we're speaking about today, and This is the valuation of the assets purchased from the City of Columbia. And it says we purchased PRC, that's the company the box we put it in, but it's really the assets and the customers, sewer customers. And it was back in March of 2013, almost 7 years ago, 6.5. It was purchased for roughly $18 million from the city. And it was about 11,000 residential equivalent customers. And we acquired the collection system and the lift stations and the customers, but no treatment plant. Those customers now are being treated at our Spears Creek plant, which is in the old Palmetto territory, which again, we combined the two companies 2 years ago, Palmetto and PRC, for efficiencies and cost reasons. We agreed to assume the rates that the city had in place and keep them for as long as we could. We eventually, after 5 years, filed our first rate case. During those 5 years, the city rates went up 44%, and the PRC customers had a 0 rate increase. And again, mentioning that those customers for us right now are at $52.10, and that's a flat rate. We took them off of volume. And then they would be $71.25 had they stayed with the City of Columbia. In this case, there was a number of difficulties trying to identify what the proper rate-based value would be for those assets that we purchased from the city. And if you remember, this was late 2017, early 2018. In the regulatory world here in South Carolina, it was a difficult time. We're under a lot of time pressure, tried to get some studies done, but it became probably most effective to say, let's defer this until the next rate case and give us a time to come up with studies and analysis and look at what other folks are doing for these assets. What it also did is we had offered a phase-in, a no-cost phase-in, but that wasn't accepted, and so this also had the effect of lowering the rate increase that our customers would face and deferring it, if you would, till later. So again, we're conscious of rate shock and the effects of higher rates on our customers and businesses, and unfortunately, we had a time where we had to spend an unusually large amount of capital all at once. Normally that's spread out over years. So this also helped to lessen the impact at that rate case. But it should be noted that for rate-based calculation purposes, we've been carrying that as a 0 rate base since that rate case. So I don't want people to lose sight of that. A little bit of a background on where we're at, how we got there on this City of Columbia assets valuation. The city basically had some poor accounting records, and it's also not necessarily their fault in one regard, but the records weren't great. But we were buying 11,000 customers. We weren't buying a company. When you get a company, you normally see a balance sheet, an income statement for those assets. This was just 11,000 customers as part of the city that happened to be near our territory and would be more efficiently served by us. So it wasn't like they had a division with all their financial statements that they're going to sell us. It was literally, we didn't have expenses we had to estimate. We really didn't even have customer lists until later on in the process, and we took it off of maps and we estimated what revenue would be. So in fairness to them, there wasn't something that they could give us. But the records weren't in very good shape. So we're trying to figure out, how do we start our opening balance sheet with what these assets are worth? Again, they did not use NARUC accounting rules, and their rates were not set on a regulatory process where we could go and look at something. They were set by the city council that just said, here's what it is. So really didn't have a lot. They also had an expansion fee, which was supposed to be used for refurbishing increasing the capacity of their wastewater plant. Well, as I said earlier, we didn't buy that plant. So the money that they collected, the CIAC, should stay with them, and it really didn't go to benefit any of our customers that we bought. And just sort of one more little example of the condition of the city's records, there's a Supreme Court case cited there where they mentioned that they use city wastewater revenues as a slush fund for other things, development maybe, fire department, police, who knows. But I think it's more testimony to the fact that what we were given really was difficult to really identify what the rate base would be and what the plant assets would be. So what do you do in a situation like that? Normally in industry and in utilities, you do what's called a replacement cost study. It's very common. And what it is you get some engineering consultants and valuation experts who come up with the value of those assets that you're buying today, discount them back to the time they were built, add some, reduce it by depreciation, come up with an estimated value at the time you bought these assets. It's a very common method. We use the third-party firm of Joel Wood and Associate, and Tangible Group to come up with these numbers and book our opening balance sheet, which our auditors at the time was PricewaterhouseCoopers. They were fully engaged in this process, and they were obviously supportive of those values because they signed off on the financial statements. John Hafer has hard copies of both of those studies here for you for your examination. We also then engaged a larger consulting firm called Gannett Fleming regarding the issue of the cash CIAC that was collected during the ownership of the city. And it really was called the expansion fee. And it's pretty clear from the Gannett Fleming report, which John also has a copy of, that this was to go towards the wastewater plant, the new wastewater plant, expansion of that. Whether it was used for the ballpark or the fire department or whatever, we don't know. But it clearly wasn't for the customers and the assets that we bought, namely the collection assets and the lift stations. So this is a summary of kind of where we ended up with our third-party studies. We came up with $29 million of almost $30 million of plant in service, accumulated depreciation of $12 million, for a net plant of roughly around $18 million. In the asset purchase agreement, when we bought the assets from the city, there was referenced in a particular exhibit 12 lift stations that developers had built and gave to the city. We did reduce rate base by that amount. We used the valuation from the studies and said, okay, that comes out to be a little under $900,000. We'll reduce rate base by that amount. So we came up with a rate base amount of $17.1 million. And again, the donated property was reduced, or did reduce rate base. It's our position that the facility fee is not relevant to our situation because it was for a wastewater plant that was never purchased by us. Any questions on this slide before we go to my last slide? I'll give you a chance to think of some while we go to the last slide. And the last slide is sort of ancillary to things here, but this isn't a problem or an issue or concern throughout the country. We believe 17.1 million is the proper number, but it's an industry issue. Right now, there are 11 states who have either passed laws or given guidance on how to account and how to recognize for rate-based purposes this exact issue of municipal purchase. States like Pennsylvania, California, Illinois, North Carolina, Texas now just recently. Interestingly enough, Pennsylvania has made what is essentially purchase price rate base equaling the lower of purchase price and fair market value, whereas all of the fair market values so far have been in excess of the purchase price. So what they've really done is they've made purchase price rate base value, purchase price or fair market value. You know, and they've taken a lot of the guesswork that we had to go through in estimating out of the situation. They also have a specific provision in that law that CIAC, contributions in native construction, is not to be deducted from the plant value to get rate base. Why are they doing this? They really want to see private capital flowing into the state to buy municipal properties and fix them up, and recognizing that the capital requirements over the next number of years are going to be high for infrastructures and municipalities that are frankly aging. And since then, you've seen 5 acquisitions with the big guys, Aqua America and American Water, purchase cities like Scranton and McKeesport. And that's the reason they're doing that. So again, this is South Carolina. I recognize that. The reason I'm mentioning this is our position's actually even more conservative of that. We deducted the donated property that the builders gave to the city. But what we're requesting, or will request in the rate case, is not unusual. It's not out of bounds. Others are doing it. You know, it's really not out of line. It's consistent with some other folks are doing, and it's in the public's interest and in the state's interest to bring capital like we've brought forth into the state, into the investment structure here. We like to believe we did everything and always do everything that's proper. The Milliken way is to take care of the customers and spend the money you have to, and basically provide good customer service. We have been a good operator, as you know, in terms of very few spills and responding to problems quickly. You know, we're always available. And we really pioneered getting out to the customers and hearing from them and talking to them. Andrea Powell-Baker is sitting here. She just spoke to me this morning about a call with a customer. She takes many of them. If they get by her, they eventually get to my office. And I've had people come into my office to sit down to discuss mostly their bill and late fees and things like that. So we've spent all this money and really done, we think, a good job. We're a little surprised that the last rate case turned out as it did, and that we had to defer this issue. And you know, we really think that we've done everything we could. This is a fair position. And that's how we're going to present it in the next rate case. And wanted to meet with you, I'm just about done. We just wanted to meet with you today because it's such an unusual situation, but it's starting to become more common as we see in other states. But it's not the norm, and to try to fully understand it and talk about it in the midst of a rate case with 10 other issues and heavy time constraints, sometimes it gets pushed to the side or doesn't get the effective time it needs. And that's why we came here today to speak to you, and thank you again for your time, and now happy, Brian and I, to answer anything we can.
Thank you, Mr. Dade and Mr. Stone, for your presentation. I think we're hearing, I know Commissioner Howard and I are on the Water Committee at NARUC, and so we hear a lot more about, of course, we hear a lot about aging infrastructure nationwide, and more about municipal systems, whether it be purchase or public-private partnerships, that kind of thing. So I think your presentation is certainly timely. Commissioners, any questions for these gentlemen? Commissioner Howard.
Have you considered, I know it takes legislation, but are you involved in any kind of infrastructure surcharge?
No, we haven't. I know, Brian, you've been speaking with some folks about some infrastructure pre-approval, but no, we have not.
You mentioned a couple of states, and I guess if you had your brothers, what would you draw up as legislation for acquisition adjustment? If you had control of the state legislature, pass legislative adjustment, acquisition adjustment, what would you come up with?
I haven't read all of the state's laws. I have read Pennsylvania's in detail, and you know it's a very fair law. Again, if you want municipal privatizations or municipal contracts, you know, some of these things are huge burdens. Calculating CIAC and then deducting it from rate base, I would look at Pennsylvania. We've had discussions with mayors and councils and city managers of a number of small, mid-sized towns in South Carolina, and frankly, this is one of the stopping points. And the other thing is, all of a sudden, they don't pay property taxes. We would, and that's one too. It's for a different day, but I would look at Pennsylvania's.
Are you on do you have what is your rate of return now? Are you on the other methodology?
Well, we are on the margin.
That's what I meant.
Method. Last rate case, it's not decided yet. We're likely to file on a rate-based method where we're obviously under earning on both. I mean, we have $18 million or $17.1 million of plant in at zero. So.
Okay. Thank you much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, any other questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Whitfield.
just a quick question or two for you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to have you with us again today, Mr. Stone, Mr. Today. I wanted to ask you, I guess, just a little bit of history, which the two of you have already gone over a little bit, but back to where we were talking about the former City of Columbia customers that y'all adequately explained were just customers. You didn't buy any books, records, company. You just basically purchased those customers. And, of course, as you stated, had a hard time doing so because the records and expenses involving those customers were hard to reconcile or get a hold of, or both. But weren't some of those customers, I think you mentioned 11,000, and I'm kind of going from memory here from what I remember about it, but weren't some of those customers also in that one at the bottom, I guess on page 6, at East Richland County Sewer District? I think the bulk of them, if I remember right, probably were City of Columbia customers, but didn't at one time some of those customers fall in that East Richland County district, but were served by the City of Columbia systems, or and I don't remember a number, but certainly it was a portion of those 11,000 customers. Is that correct?
I honestly don't remember that. There could have been a few, but there couldn't have been that many. I don't think so. I can check if you'd like. But I don't, looking at the maps and the locations, and again, this is 7 years ago. I don't remember that, and they certainly were under the tariff of the City of Columbia.
That might have been before your time, Mr. Stone, but if you remember, I certainly.
No, it was before my time, and so I don't remember it, and I haven't heard that internally, but we can certainly go check.
Well, and the reason I ask it is because if you see that East Richland Sewer District customers are still at the 3577, your lowest on your chart, and of course I see the difference between the 5210 and the 7125 that City of Columbia out of city customer rates are paying now, but I just wondered if some of them, obviously I do recall them somehow having lower rates prior to coming in, and I realize they had a capacity issue, and you all ran that northern pipeline ultimately on out to Spears Creek.
What I do remember having heard, and this may be what you're thinking of, is that I've heard some anecdotal information about people in the East Richland County district across the street or nearby with some of our customers, and our customers basically asking the question, these guys are paying this, and now you want me to pay that.
Right.
How is that fair? So yes, I don't think that in the stories I heard that they weren't our customers. They were literally a neighboring utility. And so we did have some of those questions come up, as you would imagine, during the last the time leading up to the last rate case.
Yeah, and I guess what I don't remember is at the time of acquisition, getting any calls from somebody saying, I just went from, I don't know what it was, $30 to now what you're charging me, which is what the city was charging, supposed to be charging you. So I just don't think there could have been that many.
Yeah, it just seems like during during that time, and I'm going back some years, there were some discussion, there were some complaints, if you will, and some discussion. I don't know if ORS remembers that or not, but seems like there was something, but basically what you're saying, the 11,000 were pretty much all directly from the city and not, to your knowledge, not any or very little maybe from East Richland.
That's correct.
I guess one more question, maybe to you, Mr. Stone, from environmental standpoint. Want to talk about the third point of that capital investment, the water redischarge pipeline, the 19 million. Not talking about the northern pipeline, but the discharge pipeline, which went on from Spears Creek to Watery. How many gallons, if you know off the top of your head, how many gallons discharge does that DHEC permit allow for into the Watery River? Of course, you got a paper mill out there, you got a coal plant out there, and then you go upstream above the dam in Watery, and you got effluent coming from the city of Charlotte. By the time it gets to that part of Watery, I guess from an environmental standpoint, it's pretty loaded down.
We the NPDES permit is matched to the capacity of the treatment plant, and so it's 12 million gallons a day currently.
12 million gallons.
And we utilize on average between 6 and 6.5 million gallons a day currently.
6 to 6. All right, thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioners, any other questions? Commissioner Belzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. I don't have any questions. I just want to thank y'all for coming in and providing an update and letting us know what you're facing and what you're looking at. It's always good to see y'all, and just want to say thank you for being here today.
Thank you, and congratulations on your new job.
All right. Anyone else? Mr. Dade, Mr. Stone, thank you once again for being here. And if there's nothing else to come before us, Mr. Hafer, anything else?
Nothing, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Then we are adjourned. Thank you.